So I'm going to talk about how to do what I'm calling a reverse lookup on a matrix in Excel. So what I have here is a bunch of columns and they have baseball players on them. And then on the rows, they have the dates, and the values in here are the hits that they had on those dates. And so we're all familiar with an index match or a lookup. If you're not, feel free to search that. There's tons of videos that talk about all the different ways you can look up these values on a matrix using XLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and then an index match as well. What we're going to do here, though, is we're going to actually start with the value. So I already know all of these values in here. What I want to do is I want to flatten the data out into rows and then filter it based on some criteria so that I can see, for example, if I wanted to see every single player and day that had a hit, so one hit, or they went hitless that day, right? I want to see one row that says Yandy Diaz April 7th, Yandy Diaz April 8th, etc. That's what I've got over here. Is the second portion of this where we've flattened the data out, and we'll talk about the best ways to do that. We've got the column number, the row number. You see each row pertains to a specific column and row cell on the matrix. We've got the value, and then we've got the row name and then the column name as well. And then once we get all of that data, what we're going to do is create a filter where we can enter whatever values we want. So here we've said what kind of number are we looking for in that matrix. It said 0, so that's returning every single column and row cell that was 0 with the information for them, and then we can filter that by the player. So if we wanted to see just the days that Ronald Acuna went hitless, we could search that and it will return all those dates. We can manipulate that around as well. So that's what we'll be talking about here. Before I begin, I'm going to show all of the formulas I'm going to be using and some information here. And we'll go through all of this, but just going to put this in the beginning. And feel free to pause if you want to refer to any of these. I'm not going to dive too deep into it. Not going to take up too much time on the front end here since we'll be talking about this. But feel free to pause and get this. All right, so I'm over here in a new Excel, and I've just gone ahead and copy and pasted in just a small matrix here from that larger one we had. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up where the matrix is going to be on the far right side, and we're going to set it up so that we can add columns and rows as needed to it manually, and all of the data flattening and the filter will automatically add that. So if you have a data set and you know that you're not going to be adding anything to it, you can keep this on the left. There's no harm in that. But since I want to be able to add to this, I'm going to have it on the right. That way, as we add, it'll expand to the right. We won't have to worry about overlapping with the filter and moving things around on the page. All right, so I've set up the preliminary sheet here, and let's start with just a real simple concept, answering the question of how do we flatten the data. And so Excel has a built-in formula that they've recently added that'll do this really easy. All we'll have to do is highlight the data. However, we're not going to be using this because there's no way with this easy formula to return the column name or the row name, but that is the TOCOL function. So what we would do is do equals TOCOL and then highlight this right here. And you see that flattens it out right there. There's also a TOROW function, and that'll flatten it going horizontal rather than vertically. But what I've talked about on the document here is I recommend using the index match function, which we'll talk about because we're going to be having on this sheet the column number and the row number. And so by using an index match, we're guaranteeing that whatever value is in this values column is going to pertain to match up to the column number and the row number on that same line. If we use the toCol function, it will most likely match up, but we can't be 100% certain. There's nothing linking it to the column number and row number. So that's why I'm going to recommend using the index match. I do talk about some things here. There's a Google Sheets equivalent of this toCol function called Flatten. So if you're using Google Sheets, that's one to check out as well. Let's come up here and start with the column number. How do we get the column number? So what we need for this column number and row number is we just need something that will create an index column, and except what an index column is would be like something that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down to whatever specific number. And we could create that in here by doing equal sequence and just putting in however many we have. So let's say 100. It's going to create an index going from 1 to 100. So that's the way you do that, but we need to do it a little differently here. We need the column number. We want it to do 1 through 4 for the columns, but then, and that's going to pertain to column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1, and then column 4, row 1. But then after that, we want it to start over again, 1, 2, 3, 4 for row 2, and then start over again for row 3. So what it's going to look like on the column number is we need it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. On the row side, we also need it to do something a little differently than just printing the numbers 1 to 100. We need it to do 1, 1, 1, 1, and then all the way down for up to however many columns you have. So in this situation, it's going to be 4. And then after that fourth one, we need to jump to 2. 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, etc. So the way we can do that in Excel, very basically, on the left here is the column, and on the right is the row. You see, we're going to have that sequence that we just discussed. We're going to wrap it in a mod function, and that second parameter of the mod function is what number it's going to restart on. So we've got 3 here as that second parameter. You see it's created a list 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So instead of 3 here, we're going to replace it with the number of columns in the matrix, and then we add 1 on the end. Over here on the row number, a little bit of a different but similar formula. We have sequence. Notice the parameters of the sequence are a little differently here. 10, 1, 1, whereas over here it's 10, 1, 0. We'll divide that by 2, and then we're going to be wrapping it in a round up function, and the second parameter on the round up is 0. And you see the example there. It goes 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. So one of the things I've done on this formula sheet here is I've got 2 different versions of the formula. One is the raw formula that we're probably all familiar with, where we just do equals and enter in our formula. But you can see a lot of these formulas, they're very complicated, and if you were to leave this project and then come back to it later, or someone else came into it, they would look at these long drawn out formulas and be like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to begin with this. So there's an easier way that you can write these formulas to quickly figure out what's going on inside of them. Now, if you use F9 to see what these numbers are, this doesn't work as well in the let function. So each of these methods have their benefits and drawbacks, but I like the let function because we're going to be able to see exactly what's going on these more complex formulas. So I'm going to be using the let function here, and we'll start. You see we've got for the column here that mod sequence. For the first parameter in sequence, we're doing totalCells, and you see up here totalCells, it's just the total column numbers times the total row numbers. How do we get the column numbers and the row numbers? We're going to be using the COUNTA function. What this does is count up how many cells in whatever range we give it has a value in it. So if we copy and paste this over to Excel, so we'll see what's going on here. So I've got this in here. I'm going to change this around because this is old cells for an old project. So what we want to do is we want to, inside of that COUNTA function, just highlight the column numbers, or all of those column numbers up there. We could also do this down here if we didn't want to have the column number and row numbers, but I like having the numbers. It just makes it easier to match up the cells to the numbers on here. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and lock them just to be safe. And then we'll also do that with the rows down here. Now, what I'll also do, you can see that print stack there. What I'll also do is, because I want to add to this, I'm going to highlight a certain number of additional places here. I'm going to do the same with the row. And then what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to update this so that it encompasses all of these highlighted columns. Highlighting it lets us know that it's included in this formula and will update automatically if we add a column or a row to the matrix. Highlighting it's important because if we were to go beyond this, if we were adding things, it wouldn't update it in there. So the highlighting just tells us that the COUNTA function, that all of our functions that we're going to be using already formatted in here, so that when we add anything to this specific column or this specific row, it'll automatically be updated. And if we need to go beyond that, we'd have to come in here and update. You can do these as far as you want. I'm just going to do it just briefly to the right and down just for the point of this video. All right, so we'll hit enter there. And that's going to be our formula there. We've got the total cells. What we're doing here is it's counting the number of cells that have a number in it. So it's got 4 up here. It's got 10 down here. 4 times 10 is 40. So it's doing a 40 index, and it's resetting after every 4th value. That's what our column numbers here, that second parameter of the mod function. So I'm going to copy that in here. All right, and what we're going to do here is, okay. I'll move that down 1 just for formatting purposes so that you see that 4 is bigger because we've got the names here. All right, so the row function is going to be similar. What we're going to do is come over here. Let's go ahead and just copy that in, and then we'll explain it here. Again, similar thing. I'm going to highlight the column. And then the row here. We'll hit enter, and you can see there it's created the row that we're looking for. 1, 1, 1, 1, and then after column 4, row 1, it resets column 1, row 2, and etc. So what's going on here, just to recap, we've got that first parameter of the sequence, total cells. It's going to be 40 cells in this situation. The COUNTA functions allow us to where if we added a new one, it would count 5, and then that would be 50, so it automatically adjusts. Second and third parameters are 1 and 1 for the sequence, and then we divide that by the column numbers. That's the catalyst that allows it to jump to 1 up at the end of the column number, that max column number there. And then we've wrapped it in a round up 0 as the second parameter. All right, so here are the TOCOL and the index match formulas. I'm going to focus on the index match because that's the one I want to use here. But you can see all 3 of these have the same layout here. That's how we get this to work for the TOCOL. And then down here, the formulas are different on that 4th row. We're going to use the index match though. Come over here, paste this in here. So the first 2 are working the same exact way that I just explained. What this third one is doing is, with index, we have to give it an array. So if you're not familiar with index match, I recommend you go ahead and look that up. I have a video on this that sort of walk through the basics here. I think it's a good video. There's also tons of them out there. Um, but we have to give it an array as that first parameter. And that's what this is doing up here. In this specific situation, what we have to do, and I'm going to adjust this here, we'll put this, the very first matrix cell. So column 1, row 1 is what we'll have here. So we're telling it to start here, and then offset allows it to dynamically adjust. What we have to have is the W6, and that, you see we have a colon, and then the second value has to be the very last cell. So in this situation, column 4, row 10. But like we talked about, we might be adding to this, and so we want it to dynamically adjust to whatever that last cell is. So if we add a fifth column, it would have to automatically adjust to that fifth column. That's what this offset does here. So I've updated the column number and row numbers like we discussed. Last thing to update here is the actual index here. We've got this matrix array. We've updated that. We're good to go. The last two, though, are going to have to be updated. What we need here, you see here, we want the row number and then the column number. And that's what these two columns are going to serve as. So for the row number, we want to indicate we want this row here. Now this is a dynamic array, and it allows it to automatically update. In order to refer to whichever row number is on that particular row, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the very first one here, excuse me, and then we'll do hashtag on the end of it. All right, so I'm going to update this one as well. The column here, I'll select the first value in the column there, do hashtag, and that'll print the values there. So now we get to the meat and potatoes of this. We've got the row number, the column number, and the value. Now we want to get the column name and the row name for each cell. So to do this, we'll utilize XLOOKUP. This is a formula that was recently introduced in about 7 years ago to be an all-in-one function to replace the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. And so that's what we'll use here. We've got 3 items here. The first one, the row number. This will be our row number column. And again, we'll click that very first one and do hashtag. Second one will be just the row number column here. So what we'll do is erase this and highlight our row numbers here. And then the row title column will be the actual name of the rows that we're looking for. So that'll be the dates here. We'll hit equals. We'll format this to a date that we want to see by coming up here under the Home tab. We'll come down to More Number Formats. We'll choose Date, and we'll pick on that date right there. And there we go. We'll go ahead and center those. We'll center all of these, actually. And now we have the row title that corresponds to every cell. And so for the column name, we'll do the same thing. Come in here, paste this in here. Again, we'll update this first one to be the column number, hashtag at the end. For the second one here, we'll highlight the column numbers, F4 to lock, and then the actual column names here, F4 to lock. Expand this out a little bit. There we go. So now we have the column name for all of these cells. And so there we go. We have the flattened data now. And when we come over here, let's say we wanted to update this with new information. Right, just entering random numbers here. You can see that automatically updated when I entered the 5 up there. it automatically entered a new column number here, column number 5, row number 1. Got the value of 4 there. Did it down here, column 3, column 2 for player A. If we wanted to delete something, we could delete it. Automatically deletes all of that from the flattened data. And same concept down here. When we needed to add a date, we would add 11 or 409. And we can add numbers there. You don't see that there because this is going to be all the way at the bottom. We can see there that it is added that 11th row. All right, so now what I want to do is filter this based on whatever criteria I want. So I may want to say, hey, show me only the values in this flattened data that have a value of 0. Or I may say, show me only the dates relating to March 30th. Or show me only the dates related, or the values relating to a specific player. And so we're going to set up a filter system like that, and we'll walk through the code needed to get that to work. So what we'll do here is we'll say, we'll create 3 variables up here. First one's going to be column name, second one will be row name, and the third one will be value name. Over here, we'll highlight 3 cells to the right of it, and I paint them a color just to indicate that this is the place where we'll enter the data into. Those will be our filters, very basic. If we wanted to do a drop down, we could come up here to data validation, and that would enable us to do a list here, and that's how we can do a list. For this one though, we'll just enter it in there. All right, so let's discuss the setting up the filter section. So this little brief document right here does a pretty good job at summarizing exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to start out with just a basic filter, and then we'll go into how to specify exactly which columns we want to see by using a nested filter. To start with this basic filter, what we'll be doing is telling it what are the columns that we want it to consider. So we want to include all of that flattened data, so it's going to be W4, the very far left column of that flattened data, which is so in this situation, it's going to be K, and we'll change that, and then colon there, and then we're going to have the very far right column, which will be O in this situation. So that's just as simple as that for the first parameter. Second parameter, we're telling it exactly what we want to filter based on. So this W4 is going to represent what column we want the filter to be applied to, and then this second one here is going to tell it exactly what value we want it to be. So if we wanted it to be so in this situation, we would say, if we want it to be the value, we would say M5, and then it says equal. If we want it to show only the zeros, we would say 0 here. The reason this is a cell is because we're going to have that input, so it's going to be linked to that input. So let's go over to the Excel and sort of enter this and see how it's done. On this very first cell here, I'm going to enter the filter function. Now before I begin, let me say that you see I've got 3 column names here. This is because ultimately at the end I'm only going to want to see the value, the date, and the name, and I'm not going to want to see the column number or row number. But at first we're going to see all 5 of these, so that's fine, and then we'll use the nested filter to size this down a little bit. So right here on this very first one, we'll say filter. The array, again, we want to see very first row on that very far left column. So it's going to be K5, hashtag colon, and then we'll do the same thing on the very far right one, hashtag. That's the first parameter. Second parameter would be, we have to ask, okay, how do we want to filter this? So at first we're going to just filter based on a certain value. So we're going to say, what's the value column? It's going to be M. We're going to say M5, hashtag equals 0. Let's hit enter. You can see it's returned every single row where that value is 0. Again, these are off a little bit at first. Just to make things simple, I can move them over here. There we go. So I'm going to come down here just for visual purposes, change this to date. All right, so you can see there that we've got a list there. Now what we want to do is we want to update this so that it's linked to this input. So we'll, instead of 0, we'll click on this cell F4 to lock. We'll hit equals, and now right now it's returning. It looks like since it's blank, it's indicating everything is 0 or blank. If we wanted to just see 0, we could enter 0. Wanted to see every single cell that related to a 1 in that matrix, we could enter 1. And you see it's updated there. So that's generally how it's going to go. If we wanted to be able to, let's say I wanted to see 1 hit from every time Ronald Acuna had 1 hit. Okay, the column name here is Ronald Acuna, so I'll enter Ronald Acuna up here. And how to adjust it so that it filters based on both of these is over here on that second parameter. We're going to add another parameter. We'll encompass this first one with parentheses just to make things look a little better. And then to the right of that, we'll hit space, we'll hit the star button, and then we'll add our second one here. So what we're going to say here is every time this O column, so we'll click right here, O5 hashtag is equal to, we'll specify the name just at first so we can see it, Ronald Acuna here. You see that narrows it down there. And again, same concept. Instead of manually having to type this out, we'll just enter the cell number, F4 to lock, and then that'll filter it as well. If we wanted to do the row name, it would work the same way. We would just add another one onto the end here by doing times N5 hashtag equal to whatever value's in there. One thing I'll point out here is you see it's messed up because that row name is blank. You see it's not returning anything now. One way we can avoid this issue is up here. We can say on this third parameter here, we can put an if statement. It says if this right here is blank, and we can do that by saying, I use the len function. I find that works the best. So we can say len, and this just simply counts up how many characters are inside of the cell. So down here on value, the len function would return 1. On Ronald Acuna, the len function would return like 11 or 12, however many letters are in there. So what we'll say here is if len of this row, len of the row cell right there, F4 to lock, is greater than 0, then we'll do that filter. Otherwise, we'll say true here. Okay. Okay, don't like the, there we go. All right, and so that, now that it's blank, what that allows it to do is, because we put true here, whenever this is blank, len will return 0, and so it'll go to the second parameter here, which is true, and that just basically avoids any issues with the blank variables. All right, and so that's our filter. Final thing we'll talk about, the nested filter, because again, I don't want to see the column number or the row number. I only had these to help me in making sure that all of the data is on the flattened data area. So what we'll do here is do a nested filter. I'm going to move these back over here. How we'll do this, we'll come up here and then to the very beginning of the formula, we'll type filter again. The very first parameter of this filter will be our entire filter formula that we had here. Then we'll add on the end a second one. This will just be a simple list. I believe that the technical term is an array constant. Basically what this is we're going to do squiggly brackets up here, and then it'll have numbers in here, 1, 0, comma, 0, comma, 0. What this is representing, 1 means we want to see the column, 0 means we do not want to see the column. and it's going to go from left to right. Okay, so I don't want to see the first two columns in this flattened data, but I want to see the final three columns. And so what I'll say up here is I'll say 0 for that first number, because I don't want to see this column number, comma 0 for the second, because I don't want to see the row number, and then I'll put ones for the other three because I want to see those. All right, we'll hit equals, and there we go. We can come over here and adjust this date here so that it's visible. And then we'll center these, expand this out a little bit, move these to the right. There we go. So now we have a functioning filter of this matrix data where we can specify whatever we want to specify. Again, that's going to, because I didn't apply the if statement to that, it's going to mess it up. But let's do Freddie Freeman here. You can see it changes it around there. Before I end this, let's go ahead and just apply this if function to all of these, just so that we can see how it's going to work. If the len of this value, F4 to lock, is greater than 0, then we want our value column to filter based on our value column, which is M5, hashtag equals this value variable, D7, otherwise true. Go ahead and enter there. All right, so now when we erase all of these, it'll have value there, but at least having a blank one won't be a problem. So we can do 2 there. We can specify Lewis arrays. Every time Lewis arrays had 2 hits, every time he had 3 hits, and it doesn't exist, so that's why it's returning that. We wanted to say only show us March 31st. We can indicate that. You can see it filters it down there. So that's it. That's the reverse matrix that I wanted to show here. I think it's going to be useful in my situations. Any questions, let me know, and have a good one.